Hey guys, and welcome back. This video is my long overdue review of Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified for the PlayStation Vita. Like with all my reviews, the graphics, sound, and gameplay will be separately scored, and then an overall score which is not an average will be given at the end of the review, which reflects my overall opinion of the game. Call of Duty has become a series not particularly known for its graphics, instead opting for smooth 60 frames per second gameplay as its series staple. When Call of Duty for Vita was announced, fans of the series were excited to finally play an uncompromised version of Call of Duty on the go. Unfortunately, from a visual standpoint, Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified is compromised in virtually every way. The game runs at an unsteady 30 frames per second instead of a solid 60 frames per second like it does on console, making the game much less smooth, though a bit smoother than Resistance Burning Skies. Characters and gun models are a step up from Burning Skies as well, but are full of muddy textures, missing detail, and a strange white outline on all of the guns and characters. The single player portion of the game is also missing the large set pieces from the console games, which is also a shame. I guess the best thing I can say about the graphics is that the frame rate isn't as much of an issue in this game as it was in Resistance Burning Skies, and while not as visually impressive as the console titles, the visuals don't necessarily offend the eyes. The graphics of Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified get a 5.5 out of 10. So I'll say this right from the get-go, the sound of Black Ops Declassified is, unfortunately, very disappointing. So let's start with the good. The actors who voiced Mason and West from the console games reprise their roles in this game, and they do a fine job given the lines they were told to read. The music is also straight out from the console games, with guitar riffs playing as you level up, and intense music pumping as you're playing through the intense sections of the levels. The bad are the gun sounds and lack of proper locational sound detection. The gun sounds in this game are just plain bad. They sound like popcorn being popped when they're being fired for the most part. I don't understand why Nihilistic couldn't just rip the sound from the console games. But more important than that, the sound design is just awful. You can't hear enemy footsteps even when they are right behind you. Guns being fired in the distance are often too loud, too quiet, or sound like they are coming from the opposite direction from where they're being fired. This becomes a real pain in the ass in multiplayer when you get knifed from behind by a sprinting opponent, or when you hear a blast from in front of you only to be shot from behind. The decent performances from the main actors isn't enough to forgive the weak sound in this title. The sound for Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified gets a 3.5 out of 10. While not up to the technical par of its console brethren, Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified is, well, functional. The controls are spot on, aiming feels fast and responsive just like the console titles, and the controls were perfectly adapted to the Vita's limitations. Declassified simply has two major problems, its content and its price in light of that content. You see, Declassified doesn't have a traditional campaign like all of the other console titles do. Instead, it has a series of loosely related Spec Ops missions which are 2 to 3 minutes long each. While these make it ideal to play in short bursts, they could have been a side mode like they were in the console games, not the main campaign mode. There is also simply not enough of them, as all of them can be completed in less than 2 hours. Another issue with them is the lack of diversity between the missions. All of them, the sniper mission being the sole exception, involve you being dropped alone in an area, having to move from point A to point B, and being forced to mow down all enemies in your way. There is no stealth, there are no vehicles, and there is no change of pace, which is a real shame. My final issue with the campaign has to do with how absolutely stupid the AI is. They're horrendously dumb. So dumb that when taking cover behind a vehicle, they will go temporarily insane and try to shoot through the vehicle to kill you, only to blow themselves up after a while. Despite the initial hilarity of a situation like this, you'll eventually start craving some better AI, probably after the 3rd level. After completing all of the single player levels, you can then try to tackle them on veteran difficulty. Despite the enemies being stupid on this difficulty, it is indeed tough since you're dead in 3 bullets and are forced to start the level all over again if you die. This did add a bit of longevity to the game for me, but is definitely not for everyone. Other single player modes include Time Attack mode, where you go through an obstacle course as fast as possible, and Hostiles mode, which is kind of like a single player version of Survival mode in Modern Warfare 3. This mode is a nice mode to play while you're out in a commute and want to kill some bad guys in your spare time. However, it really should have been a multiplayer co-op like the console games, and it's a huge missed opportunity that it isn't. A 2-hour single player campaign, a 1-player survival mode, and a simplistic time attack mode does not necessarily mean a bad single player game. However, I feel that the majority of hate towards this title comes from the fact that Activision charged $50 for it, and it's still that price today. You're essentially paying $10 less than the console version for this game while it's missing 70% of the console title's content, as well as its production values. The $50 price point was a gigantic show of disrespect by Activision. The game took only 6 months to develop by a low-profile team and was extremely cheap to make. Charging a premium simply because it's Call of Duty in name is a disgusting display and one that I feel justifies the extremely low scores this game has received. Thankfully, the multiplayer is much better than the single player, despite its problems. Nihilistic Software has worked out the kinks of its Resistance Burning Skies engine and got the game running at more or less a solid 30 frames per second. Map layouts are also a bit more balanced, and sound design is improved over Resistance as well. The multiplayer is indeed fun, however it does have its fair share of problems. First and foremost, the map size. The game is 4v4 online, so in order to keep the action intense, Nihilistic decided to shrink the map size down. However, they shrunk it down way too much, to the point where you're constantly spawning on top of enemies and having enemies spawn on top of you. This becomes extremely frustrating when you clear an area and throw down a care package, only to have everyone you just killed back in your face in mere seconds since they can spawn and sprint across the map before your care package even hits the ground. Maps are just too small in this game. Second, because maps are so small, sniper rifles are useless. I've played the game for over 30 hours online and died thousands of times, but not once did I die from a sniper rifle shot. Third, as mentioned before, the sound design is so bad it actually affects gameplay. There is no way to tell where bullets or explosives are coming from, and enemy footsteps are not audible. This is in no way a minor gripe, and it makes the game feel very cheap compared to Killzone Mercenary, which has exceptional sound design, which helps the gameplay. Finally, the party system just does not work properly. When you set up a party of 4 people, you and your friends are divided as soon as you enter the game. This is fine for the first match, but once rooms fill out, it should automatically switch the teams around so that you and your friends are on the same team, like the console version does. But no, Declassified does not do that, making 3 or 4 player co-op party gameplay nearly impossible. Despite my criticisms, the multiplayer is still rather fun to play in bursts, and I do occasionally pop it in to play a round or 2 of Team Deathmatch, but its problems simply cannot be ignored, and that combined with the disappointing single player, I definitely cannot score the gameplay of Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified any higher than a 5 on 10. Lackluster single player content, mediocre graphics, terrible sound design, and disappointing multiplayer all translate into a game which should have been a $20 PSN title at most. But instead, Activision decided to charge a massive premium for a bare-bones Call of Duty title like this. While it is indeed within the rights of Activision to charge whatever they want for a title, it is also clearly within the rights of reviewers and consumers to rate the title very poorly in light of that price. While I do feel that Declassified is a better game than the average rating it has received, it is still a rather bad game, especially when you take its $50 price point into account. Overall, I give Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified a 4 on 10.